Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 71 of the Titanforge podcast. My name is Ratnos, joined bright and early by my friends Tettles and Trell.
Yes, I wake up at a normal human time.
Yes. I'll save a little bit of the story about why we're starting late for the tip of the week segment. But sorry for everybody who's planning on being here at exactly when we usually start.
Watching for the live show, we're starting like 25 minutes late.
So, speaking of things that have been slightly delayed, the expansion also slightly delayed. 16 days until that comes out. Looking forward to that. One thing that we have still got going on, even though the expansion is only 16 days away, is raid testing. Raid testing has been happening yesterday. I tried to do it, but unfortunately couldn't wrangle enough guildies at the middle of the day Friday time slot. Did either of you get a chance to do any of that?
No, but it looked like
me either.
Stone Legion Generals looked a lot more interesting. They've tested that fight like what 4 or 5 times now.
And Council Blood, yeah. Stone Legion Generals and Council Blood were the two of the 3 fights on the menu yesterday, and they are 2 of the fights that have already been tested a lot, but have each time undergone some serious changes.
Yeah, the Council Blood one, like notably that's the dance boss for those who don't really know exactly what it is. Yeah, they've had to rework that dance like 3 times at this point. So
yeah, now there's like a jumping component where you get a debuff and you need to jump within 30 seconds, but when you do, it does like a pulse of raid-wide damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Definitely.
If you whirling Dragon Punch, it just kills the raid. I think that's getting fixed, but I saw that.
Is that true? Oh, okay. Well,
that does not surprise me, man. Whirling Dragon Punch is just so rough in any spot where there's anything like that. Yeah.
Where there's anything.
Yeah, any movement or jump related ability, Whirling Dragon Punch just murders you. So that's the raid testing that was happening. Our main topic this week is going to be regarding UI and key bindings. We're going to do our best to describe what's happening on the screen, but this will be an episode where the video version has some value that we can't really recreate for the audio-only listeners. So this may be a good one to check out that way. I'll put the links somewhere. Maybe we'll just make the show notes available to everybody, not just patrons this week or something, so that you can look through these images yourself afterwards if you're listening to this, in the audio-only version and you want to hear the UI things we're talking about.
I actually think that seems reasonable.
Okay, yeah. So this week, the normal patron-exclusive feature of the show notes being available, we'll just link them in the description and stuff of this one. But before we get to the main topic of UI and key bindings and stuff, let's do our tip of the week segment. My tip of the week is that if you're an iOS user, your iPhone may have been bugging you to update, and you may have updated it in the past few days. And if you did, the alarm has changed from a little spinny wheel thing to just plugging in the number. And if you do have an alarm that was at, say, 12:20 to wake up for raid testing, because that was when mine was set, and then you change it to 11:20, it will no longer automatically change it from PM to AM like it did when you just scrolled up the spinny wheel by 1 hour if you type in an 11 instead of a 12. And so that might cause you to miss an alarm if you change a 12:20 alarm to an 11:20 alarm, because the alarm might stay at 11:20 PM instead of 11:20 AM. And that's how the show is late today.
Wow, thank you so much for your tip of the week, Travis.
It's an important lesson to learn. Trial, what is
I didn't have the same problem, but I had a problem where I missed my guild's raid like a few weeks back because my alarm was set for the wrong time. So.
You missed raid?
Yeah.
Raid.
What sleep schedule were you on? A wild one?
Not a good.
Okay.
Some really weird one.
Nice. Trell, what is your tip of the week?
So my tip of the week has to do with world questing in Shadowlands. In BFA, if you remember, if anyone that played early BFA or just geared up a character recently, the world quest rewards scaled with your current item level. So you'd want to get big item level boost by running Mythic Zeros and then doing world quests after. But in Shadowlands, it's a little bit different. It scales with your renown level. So I guess if there's a possible renown level you can go up, early in the day, you want to do that first and then do world quests after that to get potentially higher rewards early on.
That makes sense, yeah. But you no longer have to do the whole like planning out to get your item level high or to then do world quests to get even more item level. That was that was definitely annoying. So nice to hear that's really gone. Annoying. All right, Tettles has for us a clip of the week. Let's observe here.
Oh god.
Tettles effect number 29. Oh, I've seen this one. Yeah.
Oh, I clipped this.
Nice. Oh yes.
I don't know if I would describe this as the Tettles effect. It seems like it was just a grip that was not, exactly what Tettles was planning on happening.
No, I was not planning on that.
Was present there.
I wasn't even planning on getting gripped, and then he just yoinked me. I sat there and I was like, this is not a bad grip. And then I just died. I'm like, that was a terrible grip.
Where? Okay, yeah, the spider's just like invisible on your screen for some reason as well. The little pools. Is that just a pre-patch thing?
Yeah, Yasmin's.
Oh yeah, now. True. They're like. Really,
it's like impossible to see. That's rough. So, I'm so sorry that happened to you, Tettles. Did that cause a depleto?
Yes, we ended up having to wipe because of that. we were pugging a random key.
Rough, very rough.
It was to prove a point, but the key was to prove a point, but
it failed to do so.
No, it proved the point. It was with Azralon and Ragnaros only gamers into myself.
Okay, so yeah.
That Demon Hunter was fucking boosting the shit out of us. That Demon Hunter was very good player. I don't know what was happening.
All right. He was a good player. Nice tank.
So our main topic this week is going to be UI and key bindings. We've already had an episode on this, like maybe 30 episodes ago. So this is going to add on that. Yeah, maybe 50 episodes ago even. But there are some reasons that UI and key binding stuff is worth talking about moving into Shadowlands because of how Shadowlands is looking. Namely, the most important thing I think that's going on with Shadowlands is that we are getting maybe 10 new keybinds for some specs, 5 to 10, depending on which spec you're on. And that is a big challenge for people that were using up exactly all of their keybinding slots and are now going to have, they're going to have to find a way to bind some new stuff. Or I bet there will be a lot of people out there who just put them all on like a clicking bar. Don't do that. We'll have some other options for how to handle that.
Don't click, please God.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that are acceptable to click, in my opinion. Bloodlust, I think sometimes people like to not have that keybound so they can't accidentally click that. So Bloodlust effect, some people like to keybind or to be clicking those.
A mount.
Yeah. Mounting, I don't know. I prefer keybinding a mount, but if you're really strapped for keybinds for useful stuff, you can click that as well. I think it's a lot more convenient quality of life to have that keybound, but particularly,
I think so too.
Particularly, what I'll do with my mount keybind is if I'm really tight for keybinds on a boss fight, I'll switch that out for like a macro that I use on that boss fight. Something like interact with mouse over, if that's something that you use for a fight. That was something that had a lot of utility on like Carapace and Azoth. Was keybinding the interact with mouse over, so you would you do a mouse over focus on the gateway, and then you'd mouse over your focus frame and hit an interact with mouse over keybind. Yeah.
I did the same thing with the pig in Freehold too. You just like whenever he starts getting launched in the air, you just like instantly put him on focus and you just like mash the bind for that. Mine is not like on a great bind for interact with mouse over, but yeah.
Yeah. What binds do you guys use for those two? Focus mouse over and interact with mouse over? I have some wild binds.
Focus mouse over is a button on my mouse because I like to be able to like quickly try to focus targets. Interact with mouse over is Alt G, so like literally just the most obscure ass bind ever.
Yeah, you don't need to press it very often is the thing. So
exactly.
Whew. That's a tough one.
Usually,
Alt G is like I'm taking my hand off the keyboard.
The more often you press a bind, the fewer buttons it should be. It should be less likely to have a modifier, and the closer it should just be to where your hands rest. Now, having an MMO mouse really helps out with having more keybinds that are easily accessible. But even if you don't have that, you can still have your your 10 most important abilities bound to 1 through 5, QE, CXZ, RFV, all those buttons that are really close.
Yeah, so since I think we may as well just start off with keybinds. Go
Okay.
out of order of what the show notes
Yeah,
say.
that's fine.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll move it up.
Do you think that like do you think an MMO mouse is like mandatory at this day and age? Because I feel like the answer is
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think it makes it a lot easier to like put a picture in your head together of how you want to do key bindings, but I think you can get around it.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who get by without, or who play fine without one. If you don't have an MMO mouse, you are gonna have to use modifier keys like Shift 1 through 5, Shift Q, Shift E, Shift all those buttons there, or Alt, or maybe both.
yeah, sure.
Probably like maybe reach over to H, Y, N, those kind of buttons. But those are doable, right? A lot of these buttons are keybound by default. B opens your bags. You need to, that's a good keybind to have access to. Move those keybinds for like opening your bags or sitting down to other stuff. You can do like Shift B opens your bags even, or even move it over to like Shift M, Shift I.
No, B and Shift B are for beam and focus beam.
No,
I keybind everything alphanumerically based on what the name of the ability is. So Wrath is on W and Lunar Strike is on L.
Lunar Strike is on L.
With your thumb, right? Do you hit space with your like one of the bones in your thumb at the base? Can't remember the name.
Yeah,
man, that would be
I
tough. Actually, the bags and the character pane thing are a pretty good idea. I'd use C and B still for those because I do open them a lot in combat, which I think is fine. But I could use Shift C and B. Although I have binds for those for other things. So
yeah, it's not that different, if you're using those in combat, which sometimes you do, particularly like opening your bags and using some random engineering item in your bags can sometimes be something you realize you need to do when you haven't keybound.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of big things you want to take into account when you're choosing what you want to keybind, especially if you're going to redo it as a experienced player. You want to decide, one, do you want to have your full rotation in your left hand, like easily reachable by your left hand? If you're right-handed, I guess. I'm assuming in this statement that everybody's using the mouse with the right hand, but just flip-flop if you're not. If you're,
I think that most people use it like that.
Yeah,
anyways.
I'm left-handed and I use my mouse to keyboard right-handed because that's
well,
just...
yeah, but there might be some people.
Yeah. If you're the other way, yeah, exactly. You just flip everything that's the Charles saying. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, or you could do it where your main rotation that you just spam all the time is on your MMO mouse. So just your normal mouse keybinds that are on the side, like 7 buttons or 12 buttons or just 2 buttons. But 2 buttons only work if you're like a Havoc DH.
I feel like as a caster player, that seems very hard to be able to pull off, putting on like my rotation on a mouse. But maybe
I think so
that's
too.
just my perspective on it. But I think that, yeah, you definitely have to determine whether or not you bind your main rotation to your mouse or like on your keyboard. I think I would almost advise generally binding it on your keyboard for your rotation.
I do both. I have I put most of my important abilities on 1 through 5, and my MMO mouse just does that as well, so I can do it with either hand for those buttons.
Oh, interesting. So that's a good take. I think the second thing you should think about though before you do all this is what spells you need to be able to spam at any given moment while you're in combat, while also talking to your group. So however you do that, if you push to talk, if you toggle mute, you need to have that keybind on somewhere else, like with your other hand entirely, or with your foot. If you do
Toggle mute is OP.
Toggle mute, yeah, is a way that you can just like so instead of pushing to talk, you toggle mute, and then later you come back and toggle it again.
I got the G600 mouse, and it has this weird ass like side thing like this like button that's on the far right side. I don't know what it's for. I use it to toggle mute. It's pretty solid.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think what Charles is saying is that you want to make sure that you don't have 2 buttons you need to press at the same time that conflict with each other on how to press them. Because
the finger globals, dude.
Yeah, well, it's if you have like 2 buttons that your index finger both hits and they're both used in the same global a lot, it's a design flaw.
I have my keybind set up incorrectly, but I'm not fixing it. Basically, there are like some utility abilities that I need to be able to press that are like off global, like Wild Charge or Solar Beam, which are both on my keyboard. Like if I had to go back and redo my UI, I would take all the off global things and put them on my mouse. I am way too used to it now. And the reason for that being is because like the off global stuff should generally be on your mouse because you want to be able to continuously do your rotation, or like vice versa. Like you want to be able to continuously do your rotation while you hit these off GCD abilities. Same with like the utility stuff. I think that like utility stuff and like off GCD abilities should almost always be on your mouse. Like your interrupt or just other utility abilities. Like, and then you put your rotation on your keyboard is how I would lay it out if I was explaining it to a newer player, probably.
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily like a right answer for how to do this, but I think that is one good thing to make sure you can do is however you set it up, that you're not putting yourself in a position where you can't, do an off GCD ability and do your rotation at the same time.
I absolutely cannot. So I just like lose half a global or whatever.
So if you were redoing your key bindings, that would be a good thing to change.
Shift B is not the move for your actual interrupt, but it's literally been my kick for like B and Shift B have been my kick for forever, so I can't fix it now.
I don't know.
As long as it works.
I think you can fix it if you want as well. Like if you force yourself to, particularly going into Shadowlands, because there's a bunch of new binds or whatever coming out. You're gonna have to find a place for your Vent Theor ability, and then for your Covenant ability and your class Covenant ability, right? So there's 2 binds there. So I think there's space to do some stuff.
I've yet to get down in the rabbit hole where I'm using shift modifier with my mouse yet, but
I would caution against using shift plus MMO mouse stuff for 2 core things. I would do that for things that you use infrequently, but because for me it's pretty awkward to coordinate my left hand doing something and my right hand doing something at the same time to do something. But there are a lot of things that you can keybind on awkward binds that is still better than going and clicking them, right? So stuff like, world markers or target markers, all of those could pretty easily be like shift or control and then your mouse buttons.
Yeah, true.
And that would be a good way to have those bound that is better than clicking to get them out. There are other options for those sorts of effects as well. Opie is an add-on that we discussed last time we had this show, but it's worth mentioning again. This is an add-on that opens up a little wheel when you press a keybind, and you can effectively have multiple things bound to the same button. The little wheel shows up, and then you can have a world marker wheel that has all the 8 world markers, and you press the button, and you move your mouse in whichever direction, and then you drop that world marker. Or you can have like potions. A lot of people use a pre-pot one.
Yeah, I have one for potions that I use actively. Whenever I played Hunter, I had one for summoning different Hunter pets because I did want different ones bound at different points.
Oh yeah, I had like 5 when I played Hunter.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like some really good ones for. I think that Hunter, it made the most sense for like having multiple Opie wheels. I felt like because like summoning pets and then like specific pet utility abilities you didn't always want bound. Like you want like pet move bound all the time, but like you don't want like everything else always bound.
Yeah, toggling your pet between like follow and passive and stay or whatever, just putting all that stuff on a wheel instead of
assist. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like ideally you keybind everything. Opie is a little bit slower to get to an outcome, to an input, than it is if you keybind, but it does save you keybinds, right? So it depends on what your important resource is. You want to make sure that you don't have anything Opie wheeled that you need to hit quickly and frequently. But if you're a little bit flexible on that and you just want to keybind it, Opie is a good way to save on those.
Mouse wheel up and mouse wheel down is also kind of OP. I use both mouse wheel up, mouse wheel down, and shift mouse wheel up and mouse wheel down. I don't know.
Yeah, those.
A lot of people do that for like interacting with mouse over, actually.
Absolutely, because it's so spammable. That's very much like one of the. If you're gonna have something like a 0.1 second window while you're close enough to a gateway to click it, spamming that mouse wheel means that you'll have an input go through in that 0.1 second window.
Yeah. It's definitely the best with interact with mouse over. I just had those binds already filled personally whenever I needed to bind interact with mouse over.
Well,
I guess I'm picking something else.
We didn't used to have the whole focus first and then interact with mouse over on the focus frame technology. Back on like Kill Jaden, you just interacted with mouse over and you tried to mouse over the thing. Yeah. So you were just spamming it and trying to get it over the gateway in time.
Stupid.
And then somebody for Carapace, at some point between then and Carapace, somebody figured out that you could focus a gateway and then interact with mouse over on your unit frame, and that has gotten a whole lot easier to do.
You can focus and interact with mouse over like like almost everything. There's like so much just random shit that you wouldn't realize that you can actually put on focus and then interact with it, like with the interact with mouse over. It's actually pretty good for some things, and I suspect that there'll be something again like the freehold pig where there's some bullshit where you have to just like focus it and then interact with mouse over.
Yeah, I think one thing that's definitely true is that there are things that you would want to bind for M plus that you don't necessarily need to have bound for raid. We were talking earlier about like mounts, for instance. I think mounting on a keybind does save you time in an M plus run, whereas it's irrelevant in raid, right? It's fine to bind over that and click your mounts in raid. Similarly, interrupts. Interrupts are really, really important in M plus, and in raid they come up once every like 5 fights. There's an interrupt. And so setting up a good interrupt keybind system is really important if you're a Mythic Pluser. Less so if you're a Raider. It's still good, but it's not a big deal. And I think one of the biggest things is focus macros and mouse over macros, particularly for stuff like interrupts. They're applicable to a wider range of abilities than just interrupts, but interrupts in particular, having the ability to focus something and then interrupt your focus, or mouse over something that's casting and interrupt that. At least one, but ideally both of those should be something your UI can let you do.
What do you think about having run bound and having backpedal bound?
Run and backpedal bound.
Because I had this expressed to me recently where somebody didn't have run or backpedal bound. They only had left and right strafe bound.
So, like W.
Their mount.
Like W's not bound either?
W and S were not bound, and they just used like
double click mouse.
Yeah, double click mouse for everything.
Ooh, I do not like W not being bound. That's really bad, I think, on any role. The S thing, if you're not a tank player, I can understand. But if you're a tank player, you should definitely have S or backpedal bound in some way. But W, like, there are definitely times where you need to be running forward and clicking something at the same time. And if your only option is to hold both mouse buttons down, you literally can't click anything while you run.
Yeah, I agree. You can't even like move your mouse to like go and focus something new or anything, or like while you're running, you can't open your bags and like do something you need to do in there.
Something I think that's important for healers, like notably Resto Druid, I think you want like rejuve or instant cast heals on your mouse as well. I don't think we mentioned that, but I think that instant cast heals being on your mouse for healers makes a lot of sense in certain cases, because they like you're going to be moving a lot of the time while you're wanting to heal at the same time, so you're going to like have to be running forward while trying to like mouse over party frames. So I think that putting instant cast heals on your mouse makes sense.
Yeah, healers often are going to have healing setups that require like clicking on people's party frames to heal them as well. That's something that I think there's a lot of difference between different healers on how exactly it looks, but it's a very common thing that healers have is mouse over based healing. I tend to think that is better than clicking to target and then healing, because clicking a target and then casting a heal on them is 2 inputs. And so that's going to be slower than a 1-input heal, which is just mousing over somebody and then clicking one button. So I think sometimes it depends on the healer itself too. I think specs like Holy Paladin can kind of get away with like click, heal, and then like heal again. Whereas like Resto Druid, you're like, or Resto Druid or like Disc Priest, you want to be applying hots, applying atonements to targets. So mouse over makes a lot more sense in that regard, because you're going to have a lot more clicking inputs as a disc or as a Resto Druid than you would as a Holy Paladin.
Yeah. And on that note, I think it's important, if you guys ever want to multi-class or multi-role, I think you need to start planning your keybinds for that now. Because if you go too far down the rabbit hole and you only play one spec for too long, but then decide later to want to try something else, then it might be too late and harder for your brain to switch to other keybinds that work for both situations instead of one. It's not just keybinds as well. Your whole UI, I think you can tell whether somebody's UI is optimized for DPS or healing or tanking from how their UI looks, right? But it is possible to have a multi-purpose one.
Why are tank UIs so scuffed? I swear.
What do you mean? What's scuffed about it?
I think it ends up being like pretty cluttery from time to time.
Well, because tanks have the most stuff they need to track, right?
Like you absolutely could tell a tank UI from like a reasonable,
because they track everything. Well, they track everything they need to know.
Because they track everything, yes.
And that makes them a better player. So when they swap to DPS or healer, they already have that information available and they can learn faster. I think everybody should do that, to be honest, as long as it's not too cluttered.
All right, do we want to look at some submitted UIs and discuss some of the things that's happening in them?
Do we want to talk about the theory behind UI, or do we want to just?
Yeah, I was thinking we could maybe do that based on where it came up for each of these. Yeah.
Sure. I think that's totally acceptable.
All right, so here's our first submitted UI. This is a nice one. So there
Do you
are
know whose UI that it used to be?
no who
You know this person. It's Valoris. He used that randomly for a week of farm during Antorus.
Okay, this reminds me of that. There's that enhancement shaman UI that shows up on people that somebody has like a sweatshirt of. That's from back in Burning Crusade, and it's just like even more cluttered than this thing. Yeah, and it's printed on a shirt. So for our audio only listeners, what we're looking at right now is a UI where there's quite a lot of clutter going on.
And by a lot of clutter, he means there are probably 7 damage texts present.
More maybe. We've got a nice little mega damage notification popping up. Yeah. Healing is also all over the screen. The total amount of numbers on this there've got to be over 100 digits. Just like of scrolling combat text visible here for multiple different add-ons that are showing the same instances as well, I think.
Dude, the mega damage has me fucking
the mega damage is great.
Yeah.
Also the streamer details window, that's half of his left side of his screen.
Yeah, love that. Love it a lot. And the omen window, and then like 2 big DPS meters. And the Titan bar in the top of the screen as well is icing on the cake for this one. So a beautiful UI. If one was looking to improve it slightly, perhaps one thing you'd want to do is make sure that your character is visible. One problem with this UI, one slight problem, one minor nitpick, is that you can't actually see your guy in the middle of the screen.
You really can't.
And
what
that
even is his character?
That's a big problem. Yeah, ideally you want that kind of the little square around your guy to be like sacred space that does not get infringed upon, so that you can see if there's about to be fire that you're going to step in.
Do you remember Sko's old UI? How he had like literally a box around his character. That was a pretty cursed UI. But I think that like at least you could see his character.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that you need to make sure you're always doing.
And then it bought. He put a fucking weaker over top his character, and I just lost it. I was like, you got to stop this, man.
It's tough because you want your information to be close to the center of your screen. So that it's weird because like to a certain point, the closer you can get it to your character is better. And then once you cross a line, it gets worse, right? It gets bad to get it that close to your character. So
do you guys play fully zoomed out?
Usually, yeah. I'll zoom in for like indoor segments of dungeons.
Yeah. I zoom in on like the last boss of Tolagor when there's tentacles flying all over my screen unless I zoom in. But otherwise, I play pretty zoomed out.
Okay, I actually always play zoomed out. I have zoom in bound, but it's bound to like my mouse or my arrow keys, so there's like no zooming in combat.
Yeah, for me, if you're in like the tight corridors of Tolagor, for instance, and moving around a little bit causes your camera to like go wild because it keeps bashing into the walls, that really annoys me. So I like zooming in just slightly more than I need to stop that from happening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I do in combat. That's the only reason I haven't changed my mouse wheel to interact, because I don't want to lose that. I can't think of a better way.
I think it helps with. I think it helps that I'm like a ranged player, so like I can just position myself differently to be able to see, as opposed to like tanks or melee that have to be. They're confined to be in a certain point, so they need to be able to make their camera work with that point that they're standing in, not necessarily being able to adjust on the fly.
Yeah, right.
Let's take a look at another UI to discuss some of the things going on here. We have Trell's UI. This is on Shadowlands beta. It's a rogue UI you've got here. So this UI is there's a lot less going on than there was in the previous one. You'll notice that much of the middle of the screen is clear and free for space. Now, you're not in like a boss fight or anything. There could be space here for boss weak auras or big wigs to show up as needed near the middle of your screen. But for the most part, that area is pretty clean. And this is a pretty minimalist UI, all things considered.
Okay, so for like boss UI and like abilities that I need to look at that relate to the fight or the encounter, I typically like to put them higher than where I would be positioned looking at that mob. So it's like there's like my character, and then there's like I like to give a little bit of space above my character as like space that I can like look at the target that I'm attacking or focusing, and then above that, then I will throw some like information related to the boss. There's also weak auras that you can put that stack onto nameplates that will give you information about the mobs you're fighting, and I find those fairly useful as well.
Yeah, I think those can be the weak auras that anchor to nameplates, or something that they really only started coming out in the middle of BFA, but they are really, really powerful.
They're solid.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones you can find. Nagi, I think, has several good ones created that are worth looking into.
Reload did the nameplate cooldowns one too.
There's like a machine learning nameplate on cooldown one as well, which is awesome. Like it updates itself to learn what the cooldowns of different abilities are and put them on nameplates. So very cool technology there.
If you don't mind, I'll talk a little bit about this one. So this screenshot shows like I have 3 weak aura groups for every spec I'm playing now in the same spots. Like right underneath my character is the most important cooldowns that I need to see and like upkeep. So like the combat meditation right in the center, right beneath my character, is something that you extend by going through orbs, so you can see it really easily. So I have it right there.
I have okay. I'm looking at a rogue UI here. Should this be a different spec?
That's it.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, the previous one actually is what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Back to okay.
So like right underneath my character, you can see combat meditation, blade flurry, and AR, which is combat rogue, ally rogue's main offensive cooldown. And then right beneath that is my row where all the roll the bones buffs go, and evasion and cloak, my major defensive. So the other really important stuff. And then beneath my actual health bar, I have like all the minor procs I don't necessarily need to see right off the bat, but I can check and like see if I have the buff now and then. Like there's blade rush, slice and dice down there. I'll talk more about slice and dice in a sec. And then to the left of my health bar, I have just like stacking maintenance buffs that you don't normally have to worry about, but every now and then you may want to see when your alacrity is about to fall off, so you can hit a finisher and try to extend it. Stuff like that I think is good for positions like that.
Yeah, that used to be more relevant when Roll the Bones was a finisher and you could roll like out of combat to keep the alacrity up. Now that doesn't work that way. It's a little bit less.
Oh, you can slice and dice out of combat.
Oh yeah, okay. So you can slice and dice, or you can dispatch a critter if there's a critter nearby.
Trell the rogue main.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are your guys' takes on like action bars always showing?
I think it's fine.
If you multi-class, you should 100%.
Yeah, Trell's UI here is doing that, right? He's got his action bars visible down here. There is a lot of stuff that you don't need to see the cooldowns of in the action bars here, right? Like stuff that's always available. You can, you don't need...
I could make that better, yeah. Like, I don't need to be able to see Sinister Strike, Dispatch.
Right.
Slice has no cooldown. Stuff like that you can put on a hidden action bar and just know the keybind by heart. But because I don't just play one spec for a long time these days, I usually just leave all of it visible just in case I forget. Like if I haven't played a spec in a week and I come back to it, I don't have to like search through my hidden action bars to remember something real quick.
Something that I set up for my hunter, I didn't do it on my Moonkin, is I actually set up like a LVUI frame where you could click through it, and I just threw the abilities on there's like an action bar that you could click through, and I threw the abilities onto it, and I just used that as the cooldown tracker and just like center that in the middle of my screen. So that works sometimes as well, depending on the class. Didn't use it for Moonkin because I track astral power a little bit more frequently as opposed to cooldown related stuff. But.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will do. I think it's fine to have, to track your abilities, cooldowns with the action bars itself rather than with weak auras. Mm-hmm. Just making sure that they're more central to your screen. Trell's already doing this a little bit. You can see that the action bars have been brought up, an eighth of the screen towards the middle or a 16th of the screen or something, which is good. Keeping those action bars from being at the very bottom of your screen helps you avoid having your eyes have to move too far to look at them.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of UIs you'll see will have them even closer to the center of the screen if the action bars are really being used a lot. But I think this is a fine place to have them as well. Particularly, like Trell said, for multi-classing, you want to... I think it's okay if you're a multi-classer to hide your action bars as well, and force yourself to learn the binds that way. That's what I do, but it definitely does lead to a couple of learning moments where you're like, what's this keybind?
Yeah. That's fine. Honestly, if you're okay with that, go for it.
Yeah, it's there. There's pros and cons to both strategies. Okay, let's take a quick look at the next picture from Trail's UI. So what's going on here? I think the big thing that jumps out to me in this one is the no poisons weak auras yelling at you on this screenshot.
Yeah, so that one I put in, and so when my poisons hit 1 minute or less, they start showing a ticker on those spots, like a small little weak aura. And then when they completely run out, they have the bigger icon just showing like no poison on both the poison slots for every rogue spec. And so it's in the same spot for every rogue spec. You want to say consistent, so when you swap, you know where everything is. And then I also left in 2 of my weak auras have conditions where they go below 10 seconds on slice and dice, it starts glowing. So I had that down there on like the kind of far from my eyes spot, kind of far from my character spot. So when it starts glowing, I don't have to like search through the minor buffs on my bar. I can just see that slice and dice is glowing, that it's safe to refresh it if I don't have the buff that gives you more slice and dice.
I have this as well, where anything in a pandemic window glows so that I know it's time to refresh it.
Yeah, and that's exactly why it's 9 seconds, because that's when pandemic happens for slice and dice, and you can roll a full combo point slice and dice and not waste any time. And I did the same thing with my roll the bones buffs at the top that you can see there.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. I think stuff like poison tracking weak auras, pets tracking whether you have a pet out. There are weak auras that'll track whether your pet's like maybe on passive because it's not been attacking recently. All of those kind of like urgent alerts for things you might be missing. Like, yeah, maybe you should notice that your pet's on passive, but also just having a weak aura there to tell you if that's happening is a lot better than not having one. So I would look into having similar weak auras for whatever can happen for your spec that you might miss.
How do you feel about weak aura packs versus making your own?
I think both are totally fine. I think if you were gonna like make your own weak auras, I think that just using action bars is also a really good way to have weak aura coverage for a lot of abilities. But stuff like tracking your roll the bones buffs, you can absolutely make those on your own. There are also several people that have already made them on their own that you can yoink their code. And I think you could also, like, if you want to have it look a certain way, you can take somebody's code and then change all the display conditions into however you want. But
yeah, I think there's no shame at all in just using someone else's UI, especially if you're a new player. You just want to get out of the default UI as fast as you can, get some good information on your screen.
I agree with that.
And then start learning like how it works and how people made that UI afterwards, so that you can customize it how you want later on, but start in a good place at least.
Yeah, definitely nothing wrong with either approach. But don't feel bad about yoinking a UI. Like that's
What about subbing for somebody's UI?
I mean, if you want somebody's UI badly and it's behind a sub wall, I think go for it. If you are thinking about making your UI only for subs, I personally don't do that.
I mean, I don't do that either, but
I don't think it's the end of the world. Like, I think if you have a UI that has a lot of original stuff in it that you have spent a lot of time working on, I kind of don't have a problem with putting it behind a paywall. I don't know actually what that does for Blizzard TOS. I think a strict reading of Blizzard TOS would maybe suggest that even that's not okay, but people do it and get away with it. So
I mean, maybe it's hard because it's like third-party code on a website that you're selling, not necessarily anything in-game tangible, right?
Well, add-ons in general aren't allowed to have, like, you aren't allowed to have them for pay, but people have done it, right? So it's a question of clearly you can put a UI up for sub only, and like you'll probably be fine. I wouldn't worry about Mr. Blizzard cracking down on you, but
I don't do it either, right? Like I
mean, I think
it out.
Particularly if your UI is just a bunch of weak auras and add-ons that other people made, even then like you have combined the ingredients together. And so there's maybe an argument there still to be made, but I personally don't feel good about it, so I don't have it behind one. So I think
we've summoned a Blizzard employee in chat.
Have we?
All right, we got to flee rapidly.
Run. Okay, let's look at the next UI here. We've got a healer UI, which, as we were mentioning, healer UIs often have a little bit different going on here. This one doesn't have unit frames on the screen in the way, like it doesn't. We don't have a raid frame setup visible here, but This does show some common healer stuff. One of the main things I think that you'll almost always see is mana being pretty easy to find on a healer bar. Here it's under the unit frame for the player near the middle. And that's important because healer mana, big deal. Big thing to keep track of, your own mana. And then a lot of keybinds. You can see there's kind of like main keybinds near the middle. And then some of the less commonly used stuff down near the bottom leftish of the middle of the screen. So stuff like Feasts and Bloodlust, all a little bit further.
I think one of the most notable things that I can at least tell from this is like you can tell she's in a party because she has the Nagi Zen tracker thing showing up. Look at how close her party frames are to her character relative to like where they were on the previous one we looked at, like on Trails. Like her party frames are very close, and that is like with good intention because
that's a healer thing.
You don't want to. Yeah, exactly. It's a healer thing. So there's always going to be something like that where you need to actively have your party frames nearby if you're a healer.
Right. Yeah, my frames are not great for healing. I got to say that. I've moved them really close to my character before. I don't like it as a tank, and I keep like shifting them a little bit farther and then putting them closer when I heal a key and then putting them back farther. I swear I can't find the perfect spot, but
I mean, it's fine to have your UI change between the roles, but it is annoying to set that up because like. if you're setting up like all these profiles for your different add-ons, it can be really obnoxious when like one updates.
And use track really quickly too.
Yeah.
But I think this is great that Melody's doing this. I think all of her frames are connected because of that too. They're all like in one.
Yeah, you can see
multiple people.
One block.
You can see that this is like pixel. These are going to line up, right? The party frames and the player frame here. If this party fills up, it's going to go right down to where the player frame is. So it's probably one pixel. Like it's probably right exactly as far close to her character as it can go without infringing on that space.
Oh, also Melody said it's Omni CD she's using for the cooldowns to the left of the party frame. I do that as well. Now Omni CD or the Zen Tracker, Nagi Zen Tracker is a good way to track your party's defensives and offensives and utility. The other thing I was going to say, a lot of healers put their frames like right beneath their character in a horizontal line. I think that's a good way of doing it too. That's like very central. You can always put your mouse wherever and then move around easily.
I think both are good. Yeah,
both are fine. Particularly for M+, I think that horizontal right below your character works pretty well. I do think it kind of falls apart a little bit in Raid because then you're having to find 15 more unit frame spots. Those can also go below your character, but then that's using up that whole block of space. It does work. Yeah,
I've seen that not be bad too. Like use up that whole entire space and like. But at that point, you have to have basically no action bars.
Well, you can move them sides of your screen, which some healers do.
Atypical positioned action bars or turned off, which both are reasonable.
There's a couple of fine answers for this. I think the main thing is identify whether Mythic Plus or Raid or both are what your UI is trying to do, and then it's fine if Raid or M Plus isn't a goal to have your UI kind of suck for that. And similarly for like multi-specking, it's fine if your UI sucks at the things you don't care about as much.
Yes.
All right.
My healer UI is not great, but I do want to make it better, but it's just like low on priority for me.
Next UI we're going to look at here is a Affliction Warlock one. Affliction Warlocks is a multi-dotter. There's a couple of key elements that I think are really good to have here. One thing you'll notice is dots on unit frames. Really important to have your nameplates. Your nameplate's showing you your dots effectively. If you're on a spec that tabs around and multi-dots, you want to quickly identify which targets have your dots and how long is left on them. In a boss,
pandemicking is an important element to dotting. So basically, pandemicking is a metric where once your dots are below 30%, you're able to refresh them, and the duration is additive from that point onward, meaning that you're not going to get clipped on any of the additional value that you would gain by dotting early.
Yeah, I think one thing. Okay.
I was just going to explain pandemic. Since we mentioned pandemic twice, the way it works is like if the dot has 30 seconds, if it gives the dot for 30 seconds, but your target already has that same dot and it's like at 5 seconds remaining, then it'll actually just turn it into a 35-second dot instead of just capping out at 30. Yeah.
That's why that feature has actually affected rotations before. Stuff like Shrouded Suffocation for rogues, which gave you like a Giga Garrote for 3 seconds. The rotation would be to apply 2 Garrotes on a single target within your first couple globals, even though you were losing most of the time of the second one, just because it was worth to get that pandemic value. 30% of a Garrote was still better than anything else you could be doing with that global. So one thing. with this UI, with multi-daughter UIs, I think to do as well is if you're a raider, boss unit frames, where you actually get those, stationary frames that show each of the boss targets in a raid fight, or even in an M+ boss fight. I think those are really potent for multi-daughters. We don't see any here because this person isn't in boss combat, but if you are a multi-daughter, I would try and have central and easily clickable boss raid frames. At least consider trying that out and see if that works for you, because I think that's a really good way to manage multi-dotting on those.
It's actually pretty important as a tank player too to have something like that. So if there's a boss that like comes in and out of combat constantly, you can just tag your mouse where the boss frame will appear and instantly taunt it without even having to look for it around you.
Yeah, I think that's it's helpful for everybody, especially multi-daughters and tanks. But everybody can try out having those boss frames be more, because a lot of UIs will put those boss frames way off to the side and never use them. And that's something that I would recommend. I would recommend trying using them more, because they're really powerful because they stay in the same spot every time.
So a couple questions I had about this UI when I first looked at it. What do you think about him having 4 different redundant dot trackers? So he has like nameplates, he has the target, he has like the debuff like text, and then he has it on his weak aura package.
That is true. That's probably a little bit more. So below,
right?
No, below the person's character, they're tracking the corruption on target, right? And then below the target name frame, you can see the corruption on the target nameplate, and to the left of the target name frame. Yeah. So there are 4 places you can see that there's 10 seconds left on corruption, which, maybe one of these places is optional. Honestly, if you're a multi-daughter, your dot duration is like the crucial information for your DPS. I kind of don't mind it being visible in a lot of places.
I think I have it visible 2 or 3 times.
Yeah,
but
I don't hate this. I think that you can play with fewer of these available, but I don't know. It's not like it's intruding on his UI anywhere else, really.
What do you think about the placement of the soul shard tracker like bar and like his weak aura that's beneath his character, or beneath his character frame?
So,
I would definitely like that to be more central for sure. Soul shards are a pretty big deal. You look at a lot, right?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. The place where there are these little bars that are tracking all the dots could maybe be moved a little bit, and you can move this, central HUD weak aura more central, and then you're moving your eyes a little bit less far to see, your target and then your abilities, right? Your eyes are kind of having to move half the screen here to cover this distance, which is maybe a little bit farther than is ideal.
I mean, as a DPS too, it having to go through your personal healing, like your personal health bar, is kind of odd to me.
Yeah, who cares about your health bar? That's a healer's job to care about.
Just heal me.
Yeah, you just put that thing way off to the side.
I don't think that's correct, but I think that like if you swap those two, I think it'd make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I think that can work as well.
I do like the size of his dots on his nameplates, on his target nameplate. I think when you have like five nameplates stacked on top of each other, and your debuffs on them are really small, it's really difficult to tell which one you need to refresh soon as a dot class. Like my UI is not great for dot classes either. I would definitely want to enlarge on my debuffs. But since I'm a tank player, I want to be able to see threat more, and so I keep it small for a reason. But
it's one of the things that you absolutely, if you're playing a dot class, you wanna spend a lot of time on debuffs on nameplates, right? And make sure that they are exactly how you want them. Make sure that they're not doing any weird clipping and stuff. Make sure that they are displaying everything you
need to figure out how to display pandemic on nameplates. I have never figured out how to.
I'm pretty sure that Plater has the functionality to do that with the debuffs, or you can anchor weak auras to nameplates as well, and just anchor a weak aura that tracks Moonfire on target.
I've been using Elv, but I think that, I don't know.
Plater gang. All right, next UI here, we have... This is an arcane mage.
Oh yes, it is.
This is Anastasia's UI, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing that jumps out to me here is the boss mod near the middle of the screen. This is actually a pretty common weak aura now that a lot of people use. It's called the PHO guild. weak aura, and it adds on to your bigwigs and changes how it displays, such that it's this kind of either vertical or horizontal bar that abilities, as they're coming in the future, will enter the bar when they're like 10 seconds away and then scroll down to the bottom as they're about to happen. I think that's a lot of people like the way that looks, so that might be something that a lot of people could consider using for their bigwigs. I tried it, didn't work for me. I prefer the old bigwigs bars, but it's a good way to make bigwigs take up less space, and it might display the information in a way that's more effective for you.
Really good point to also point out is like ERT note is very far off to the side, and like damage meters, shit like that's all like very far off to the side on the right hand side of the screen.
Yeah,
I think it's information that I don't know if damage meters necessarily, but the ERT note specifically is information that you need to look at eventually or occasionally, but it's not something that you're going to be reading actively in combat or like having to look at for extended periods of time. So you like look over and glance, you're like, oh, okay, I go to the left side, and then you just like walk over to the left side, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like generally stuff like minimap and all of these random buffs that you don't have weak auras to track. And as a DPS player, like other players' unit frames, particularly if you're a DPS player that doesn't cast anything on anybody else, you don't have a B-res, you don't have any kind of off healing abilities, just putting all of the rest of the raid frames up in a corner of the screen, totally fine to do.
So much.
It's totally fine. It's fine to have them more central as well.
Fine, but I don't know. I think it makes you a worse player because, like, okay, yes, as an individually focused player, it is fine to just shove your unit frames off to the side because I don't care about anybody else. I'm just trying to hit this boss for the most damage. But at the same time, you do kind of care about, like, calling out deaths or something like that, right?
Even not calling them out, but, like, being aware when somebody's died.
Exactly.
It can be really, yeah. I personally find that as well. Like I would, if this was my UI, I would be turning these into like the grid and moving it over near, on the left side of the player unit frame and stuff. Probably.
Anastasia in chat says, remove curse is a healer mechanic, which Mage has a decurse ability.
Mage has that. I was about to say that.
Whatever, yeah, make the healers do it. That actually does matter on Mott, but Mott doesn't matter, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, in general,
the thing is, like, even if you play a spec, you can't really help your raid. Like you can still help as Arcane Mage even just a little bit, but you want to be prepared to be able to heal your raid or dispel or like actually just see who has what debuff better. So I think the grid style unit frames for raid at least are BIS. Although I think this looks awesome. I remember seeing a UI like that when I first started playing. I was like, oh, I want raid frames like that.
Yeah,
I think it looks dope. Like aesthetically, it looks really cool.
And sometimes you do have to make a trade-off, right? Like you can make your UI a little bit worse to look better, right? And like your UI looking good is value. There's value in that also. Yeah. All right. Next UI here, we have a Protection Paladin. Yep, Protection Paladin UI. This is a classic case of tank UI where there's a bunch of information that's being displayed here, but a lot of it is important. So the things we're seeing, there's central display of like every cooldown that could be relevant to this person. As a Protection Paladin, you have even more of these. You have all your blessing, protection, and stuff that you want near the middle of your screen. Then we have like a kick tracker a little bit off to the side of that. We have the raid frames just below this person's, player frame themselves, with everybody's cooldowns as well. This looks like Nagi's weak aura that tracks those, all in the center as well. And then up at the top, we have some bigwigs bars coming in as well. And also there, it looks like there's some raid CD tracking happening in the top left, which is, this is, in this particular instance, it's duplicated information with what's going on next to people's raid frames. But in a raid setting, I imagine that the Nagi weak aura would go away and you would just have this for people's, raid cooldowns.
How do you feel about DPS having threat meters, Trell? Do you think it's necessary?
I mean, threat meters, no. Threat nameplates, yes.
Okay.
I used a threat meter one time in all BFA, and it was when I was kiting the last bosses in KSM for MBI style of content. But I don't think threat meters are really necessary, honestly, unless you're playing with a code tank that steals your threat a lot. But having nameplates that change color based on whether you have secured threat as a tank, whether it's close with another person, and then whether you just don't have throw the target at all. Having 3 different colors for that's pretty important, I think. And in reverse for a DPS player, you should have that as well.
Yeah. How about this UI in particular, Charles? Is there anything you that is apparent to you? One thing I like about this UI is the Shield of the Righteous uptime is very central and very big. It's the biggest icon on the screen, and that's
everything
really important.
Is centered around that. I think that's great. I honestly don't see a problem with everything being slightly off to the left like that. It is like too much in a row, like the entire column left of his character is kind of blocked off. Like I think he could die potentially because of that, but if there's a little more space between things, I think it'd be okay. I don't know about the block of keybinds above his health frame. That's my only concern, really.
That is my biggest concern too, because that block is so large. Like it's hard to see. Like you're gonna have to turn your camera even more to be able to get swing something back into your field of view to be able to actively look at it, because there's no spaces.
If there's a mob that's like over, you're definitely, this is the kind of UI where you're going to compensate by having a slightly different camera angle depending on where mobs are. I don't think it's the end of the world to do that. Like sometimes that is just the price you pay for having information be central. But yeah, there may be a way around that as well, with a little bit more spacing, or there are some of these rows could go away as well, right? Like you have a one pretty close to empty row that you could probably just have these be, instead of a 6x6 grid, this could be a 4x8 grid or something, and you'd have enough buttons to still fit everything, and that could make some more space. All right, I think we have one more.
Overall, it's not bad though. He's tracking a lot of good information.
Okay, we've got one more UI in a similar vein to the first one we looked at here. This is another.
Oh, what is this?
This is a Wrath of the Lich King UI. Oh yeah, very, very nice. This is, dude. A lot of people had UIs like this actually back in the day. To be fair, a lot of spaceship UIs.
Why?
Well, you just download these add-ons, and you just keep downloading add-ons that did duplicated functionality, because it was like, oh, this looks cool. This is not a majority case by any stretch, but I believe a higher percentage of the player base had spaceship UIs back then than do now. Particularly stuff like all these extra like Titan bar and like a bunch of random, non-important for combat information being displayed prominently. Stuff like your XP per hour and how much gold you have on your character.
Yeah, true.
All that
I like
stuff.
how they had so much. They still even have space to put like the boss abilities somewhere, but they put it directly over the character after all that stuff on the screen.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Very, very.
Would you ever go back to X Pearl, Dratnos?
Yeah, I don't think X Pearl is that. X Pearl was that was like unit frames, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think X Pearl is egregiously bad. No.
Sang still uses it.
Yeah, I don't think that it's like an add-on that's been obsoleted that much.
Mm-hmm.
You can do everything you want with it, particularly because you just anchor some weak cores to it. Anyways, that goes through our submitted UIs for this episode. We'll probably do another one. We'll probably do a UI episode like once a year or stuff. So if you didn't get your UI critiqued this time, we'll do more episodes like that next time. We're floundering for content in the middle of a 9-month content drought.
Fair.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah,
I think the short story is UIs are actually very complex to make. And making a good UI is a real challenge, and you probably need some experience before you do it.
Yes.
But thinking about it and like changing one thing now and then is a good way to do it, instead of putting it off for 3 years like I did all of BFA and then redoing all of it at once, maybe.
Yeah, making little changes is obviously great, but I think a lot of people do kind of have this, if you're going to change one thing, you may as well just change it all at once mentality, because there's going to be a learning curve either way.
I think in particular, a couple things that you could probably take away from this is like key bindings are player specific. Make sure that you have everything bound is like the most important thing, and then kind of where you have it bound is like subject to you. Beyond that, delete some of your shitty weak auras from this expansion. That'll probably make you lag.
Oh yeah. That's a big to-do list.
True.
Business is when you go into Ny'alotha for the last time, after you hearth out, whenever that is, whether that's already happened or whether that's next week or the week after. go through and delete all of your BFA boss mods or boss recores and stuff. Those don't do anything anymore. Lob them. Save up the WeCore space. You will need it. All right, let's thank our supporters over at patreon.com, and then we will get to our Q&A segment. Our esteemed friends, great supporters of the show, include Paul of US Proudmore, Fart God X, Azeroth's champion of the guild Ice Cream Bikini Girls, Riley.
Man.
Delete DH. He breaks his bow in a key, but immediately respecs to Monk. Gopher. After much consideration on buffs and nerfs, I'm going Fury Warrior. King of Skills, Zuko. Ja. I wish I was Dratnos' Dino Pillow. Chromed, Trekkie, The Marshare, Regulus, Never Nude, Chewy. Delete DH, aka Devastated Elves, left Loon to embrace Demon Hunters. Dude, it's cheating to have DH in your acronym be Demon Hunters, I think. I think that's cheating. Lufer, ZivXX. Nominating acronym substitutions using meaningful idioms, or Nasumi.
That was great.
Sen of US Kill Jaden. Dazboot, better Mage Lead than Tal. Brought to you by Dratnos the Excel Wizard, Brad Ceratops. Gino the Outlaw Boomer. Necrus. Will Blizzard care about balance, class identity, and agency? Shadow Priest can pump if you chain pull, just give them a chance. Nevuk, Sinmora, Eevee, Frosty K New Meta. Stevenson, an unnamed benefactor. Take Light of the Protector and then Frenzied Regem off the GCD. Woe Bonesy No Verse. No Trick. Vamp of Storm Rage. I scheduled a Tettle's Flame. Maticus. Sean claims full responsibility for Guardian being meta in Season 1. Dymat. Syncope, Gamer Dad in Training. Dude, by the way, Guardian does be looking kind of thick.
Yeah, Guardian is looking good.
You know, damage aside, it is that spec mitigates.
V tanky, yeah.
Feral Druid is just a hunter pet with independence. Heltari, Supra. Hanny is going to pump in Shadowlands. Nyx, Xylic. My brother needs to play more and stop being a noob. Flick thinks Mort needs to reroll from balance. Gallic, Brusif, Chewy, Dratnos Routes or Biss. Thanks everybody for the support. All right, Q&A time now. First one comes from Shroudstock, who asks, I would like to know which classes Trell and Dratnos will choose if Shadowlands was released now. We don't need to ask Tettles because we know what he'll play. It's not about me wanting to know which class is best, but rather what is the thought process behind my pick and why these classes would be working best for my playstyle or my group composition. So Trell, would you like to go first on this one? Or would you like me to go first? Have some time to think.
I can go first, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm playing Rogue, at least for the first tier for my guild. We just need another Rogue player, so I like to multi-class. I think it's fun, so I volunteered to do it. I'm going to maintain at least a Monk, because Monk's my thing and my identity for Mythic Plus. And then I'm probably going to level a third character. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet. It's looking like maybe Druid, because we were just talking about how good Bear is. Could be a Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter's looking good, but we'll know once it gets closer. I kind of keep my second and third slots for characters flexible.
Yeah, similarly, I'm going to be spending the first weeks of the expansion leveling up several characters, several tanks, probably 3 or 4 or something to be ready for raiding on them. Right now, if I had to name one as a main, it would probably be Blood Death Knight. Blood Death Knight brings a lot of value to a raid environment, particularly with like anti-magic zone. Death Grips are looking okay, but not a big deal. And it just looks like they're going to be pretty sufficiently tanky. And for a raid setting, I think something like Anti-Magic Zone is valuable enough that like all the tanks are probably going to be able to live, and so whichever tank brings the AMZ is kind of sweet. But I will have maybe some combination of Brew, DH, Guardian, Paladin ready as well. I don't know which of those I'll also have leveled and ready, but for tanks, for raid tanks, it's valuable to have multiple options available, because if there's raid tank utility that's valuable, giving up 10 item levels, as long as your tank can still live to get access to AMZ or to Chaos Brand or to whatever that other tank spec is going to bring, is a worthwhile exchange. Yeah, Mass Grip, absolutely. Or even like Bop from Prop Paladin. So having those things be Stampeding Roar, all of those have been worth dropping item levels to bring. So for high-end raid tanks, that's the most multi-classy role at the start of an expansion.
Our tanks are just going to play double bear.
Oh, yeah.
Stampeding Roar owns, actually.
Dude, Stampeding Roar...
Pay homage to Nighthold.
Oh yeah, and Tomb of Sargeras, right? Tomb of Sargeras is also a bear, the season of the bear.
It's like Bear Blood Decay, but yeah. But
Yeah.
it's really stupid then too.
Well, Sabina were owned on Kill Jaden.
Mm-hmm.
Blood decays had to be gobos, so you didn't get lobbed off the side of the platform. That's so stupid.
Oh, I would love to see 2 Guardian Druids just shift into human form, pop Heart of the Wild, and then press Convoke and just heal the entire raid to full. That'd be awesome.
Tell you have to do that.
That could actually. There are a couple boss fights where there's some intermission-y times that could be working. All right, next question comes from Kalal in Twitch chat. Is hiding damage / healing numbers on UI controversial? So this is actually something that, a couple UIs that we've seen have done this differently. This is like scrolling combat text that shows the numbers. Like, if you do 5,000 damage with Arcane Shot, do you want a little pop-up thing somewhere that says 5,000? Or do you want that hidden entirely? Or do you want it somewhere subtle, like on the target frame or something? I don't think there is a hugely wrong way to do this. I think there are some benefits to seeing the numbers on your abilities. And I think there's also times where there are also people who will never get any useful information from seeing, how much damage their last Arcane Shot did. And so it's fine to hide it as well. Particularly if it's cluttering up your UI, it's fine to hide it.
I think what you're saying about it could be good to see how much damage something does instantly, especially when you're learning. I think it's good to see like how your abilities flow and what does the most damage at certain times, like during your CDs, outside your CDs. You kind of get a better feel of what to press in certain situations, because you can tell how much damage it does right off the bat.
If you're getting that information out of it, it is valuable. There are a lot of people who are never gonna, who will never really put together like, oh, my Arcane Shot did 20% less damage this time because I screwed up, whatever thing.
I think it also depends on like what spec you are and like what you're showing. I think as like a multi-dotter, I think if you like have a bunch of dots active, you don't want to have scrolling damage text every single damage event. That is cursed. Yeah. So
Agreed.
I mean, personally, I have scrolling damage text on, but I don't show periodic effects from them. But it comes down to preference, I think.
Yeah, I kind of like having particularly like AoE abilities show how many targets got damaged, and one way of doing that is by having each of them have a little number pop up next to them, so that I can kind of tell if I'm hitting everything with my AoE.
That's a good point. Yeah, as a tank player, you probably should do that as well, so you can make sure that like your Thunderclap hit that really far mob that was just barely in range, so for sure you have like some amount of throw on that mob.
All right, our next thing is not a question, but a comment from Melody, who asks, or who says, if anybody uses default Blizzard raid frames, there's an add-on called Enhanced Raid Frames that allows you to add additional buffs to track on the frames. And you can also use weak ores to change the texture of the frame as well. Yeah, there are a couple of like, people like the default UI in some cases, and there are ways you can make the default UI work for you that you don't need to like overhaul everything to a modern looking thing. But doing a couple little tweaks like that can be a really good way to make sure you're still getting all the functionality of a modern UI.
I agree.
All right. That's our Q&A segment gotten through, and that is our show gotten through. We'll be back next week if we can come up with a topic, which please help us if anybody has any topic ideas. Oh God, soon the expansion will come out, and we'll probably also announce what our plans are for the first couple weeks of the expansion. Right now, I'm imagining we'll be able to hit shows as the expansion comes out in the first days. I'm not sure. Maybe not.
Oh
yeah, Tettles is busy that first weekend as well, right? So yeah, we'll talk about it internally, and we'll let you guys know which, if any, weeks we're gonna miss. We may end up missing that first week. If Tettles is busy, we'll just be playing video games instead. Then that's fine. Or busy at whatever Tettles' thing is. So we might take the first week of Shadowlands off or something then. But anyways, we'll let you know what the plan is for that soon. Maybe next show. For now, though, that's the end of this show. So later, everybody.
See you in 16 days.